The moment you step into a cult initiation, something subtle but irreversible begins to happen in your brain. Because long before belief changes, perception does. Most people imagine cult recruitment as brainwashing through ideology, but the truth is far more unsettling, because the real conversion happens at the level of attention, emotion, and identity before any doctrine is accepted. In the first moments, nothing dramatic occurs, which is exactly why it works. Your brain is not attacked. It is softened. It is guided into a trance-like state that feels safe, meaningful, and emotionally charged all at once. This state is what psychologists recognize as a dissociative absorption response, and it is the foundation of every successful cult initiation across history. The Murican Trance is not about nationality or politics, but about a specific psychological condition where personal identity dissolves into symbolic belonging. It begins with emotional synchronization. Music, chanting, shared language, repetitive slogans, or rhythmic speech slowly align breathing patterns, heart rates, and emotional tone across the group. When bodies synchronize, minds follow. Your brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, not because you trust the group, but because your nervous system interprets synchronization as safety. Safety lowers critical thinking. Lowered critical thinking is not stupidity. It is biology. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for skepticism and analytical reasoning, becomes less active when emotional bonding increases. At the same time, the limbic system becomes dominant. Emotion replaces evaluation. Meaning replaces logic. This is the first shift of the trance. You stop asking whether something is true and begin asking whether it feels right. Cult environments are engineered to maximize this shift. They use simplified language because complex language requires analytical processing. They use repetition because repetition reduces uncertainty. They use emotionally charged narratives because emotion creates memory faster than facts. Your brain is slowly nudged into what feels like clarity. Clarity feels good. Confusion is stressful. The cult removes ambiguity. Ambiguity removal is intoxicating. The mind prefers certainty, even if it is false. This is why slogans feel powerful. They compress complex reality into emotionally satisfying conclusions. Once this compression happens, your brain experiences relief. Relief creates gratitude. Gratitude creates openness. Openness allows influence. This is not manipulation in the cinematic sense. It is conditioning through comfort. The trance deepens when personal vulnerability is introduced. Recruits are encouraged to share fears, failures, frustrations, or feelings of being lost. This sharing feels authentic. It feels healing. What the brain does not realize is that vulnerability increases suggestibility. When you expose pain, your identity temporarily destabilizes. A destabilized identity seeks structure. The cult provides that structure instantly. Your brain associates relief with belonging. Belonging becomes the solution to pain. Once pain and belonging are linked, leaving feels like danger. The group now occupies the role of emotional regulator. Your nervous system starts outsourcing safety to the collective. This is a critical neurological shift. When safety is externalized, autonomy weakens. The brain begins checking the group for cues before forming opinions. This is not obedience. It is dependency. The Murican Trance also relies heavily on symbolic identity. Symbols bypass logic. Flags, colors, gestures, uniforms, phrases, or rituals activate archetypal meanings stored deep in the brain. These symbols create a sense of something larger than the self. The brain craves transcendence. Transcendence reduces existential anxiety. When a group offers transcendence, the brain binds to it quickly. Individual doubts feel small compared to collective meaning. This is why cult initiations often feel euphoric. Euphoria is not proof of truth. It is proof of neurochemical alignment. Dopamine reinforces the experience. The brain marks it as significant. Significance creates memory priority. The initiation becomes a core emotional memory. Core emotional memories shape identity. At this stage, the trance is not total, but it is active. The recruit feels chosen, seen, and purposeful. Purpose is addictive. The brain will protect sources of purpose aggressively. This is where moral framing enters. The group introduces a clear division between us and them. This division simplifies moral reasoning. The brain prefers binaries under stress. Nuance requires energy. Certainty conserves it. Once moral binaries are accepted, dissent feels threatening. Threat triggers defensive cognition. Defensive cognition blocks new information. The trance stabilizes. What makes this state dangerous is that it feels voluntary. The recruit believes they are choosing freely. In reality, choice has been constrained by emotional architecture. Options outside the group feel empty. Options inside feel meaningful. This is not force. It is gravitational pull. The Murican Trance also suppresses internal contradiction. Cognitive dissonance is uncomfortable. The brain resolves discomfort by adjusting beliefs to fit behavior. Once someone invests emotionally or publicly, belief follows. Commitment escalates gradually. Small agreements lead to larger ones. Each step feels harmless. Each step reduces the ability to step back. The initiation process rarely feels extreme. It feels reasonable. That is the most dangerous part. The trance is maintained through constant stimulation and reinforcement. Silence is minimized. Isolation from outsiders increases. External information is reframed as hostile or ignorant. The brain learns to distrust sources that challenge the group narrative. Trust becomes centralized. Centralized trust is control. By the time ideology becomes rigid, the neurological groundwork is complete. Belief is no longer questioned because it is no longer just belief. It is identity. Attacking the belief feels like attacking the self. This is why cult members defend ideas that harm them. The brain prioritizes identity preservation over truth. Truth can be sacrificed. Belonging cannot. The Murican trance is not rare. It is not exotic. It is a predictable state the human brain enters under specific emotional, social, and environmental conditions. Most people are not immune. Intelligence does not protect against it. Education does not prevent it. Awareness helps, but only slightly, because the trance does not ask permission. It unfolds quietly, while the mind feels safer than it has in a long time. And once the brain associates safety, meaning, and identity with a group, separation begins to feel like psychological death. This is only the opening phase of the trance, because once the brain fully entrains to the group, something far more profound happens. Personal morality begins to shift. Reality itself begins to bend, and the line between belief and self disappears completely. That transformation is what unfolds next. Once the trance stabilizes, the brain begins reorganizing reality itself, because belief is no longer evaluated as information, but absorbed as orientation. At this stage, the group does not need to convince you of anything new, because your nervous system has already decided where safety lives. Safety becomes the reference point for truth. Anything aligned with the group feels true. Anything outside feels suspicious, hostile, or empty. This is not paranoia. It is adaptive pattern recognition misfiring in a closed environment. The brain evolved to trust signals from the tribe, because isolation once meant death. Cult initiation exploits this ancient survival rule. Once belonging is established, the brain begins filtering perception to protect it. This filtering happens automatically. Contradictory information is not debated, it is discounted. Discounting reduces cognitive strain. Strain threatens emotional stability. The brain always chooses emotional stability over accuracy. This is why facts lose power once identity is involved. At this stage, memory itself begins to change. Experiences are reinterpreted to align with the group narrative. Past doubts are reframed as ignorance. Past suffering is reframed as preparation. The brain edits autobiographical memory to preserve coherence. Coherence feels safe. Incoherence feels dangerous. When memories are reshaped, the self is reshaped with them. This is why former identities feel distant or false. They no longer fit the new internal story. The trance deepens through behavioral commitment. Recruits are encouraged to take visible actions that signal loyalty. Public commitment is neurologically powerful. Once behavior changes, belief follows to reduce dissonance. The brain hates inconsistency. It resolves it by rewriting belief. Each act of loyalty strengthens the trance. Each sacrifice increases perceived value. Loss increases attachment. This is why giving up relationships, time, money, or autonomy strengthens devotion rather than weakening it. The brain assumes that no one would sacrifice without reason, so it invents one. That invented meaning feels profound. This meaning reinforces identity fusion. Identity fusion occurs when personal identity merges with group identity. At this point, harm to the group feels like harm to the self. The brain's threat response activates when the group is criticized. This is why cult members react emotionally rather than rationally to dissent. The reaction is defensive because the self feels under attack. The trance also alters moral reasoning. Morality becomes situational rather than universal. Actions are judged not by harm or fairness, but by loyalty. Loyalty replaces ethics. This shift happens gradually. At first, moral exceptions feel temporary. Then they feel justified. Eventually, they feel necessary. The brain reframes harm as protection. Protection feels righteous. Righteousness releases dopamine. Dopamine rewards alignment. The trance is chemically reinforced. Fear also plays a role, but not always overtly. Fear of exclusion is more powerful than fear of punishment. Social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain. The group does not need to threaten. The brain threatens itself. It imagines the void outside the group. The void feels unbearable. This imagined emptiness keeps members compliant. The trance is maintained through controlled information flow. Not censorship, but framing. External sources are labeled as corrupted, dangerous, or unenlightened. The brain trusts internal sources more. Trust narrows. Narrow trust simplifies decision-making. Simplification reduces anxiety. Reduced anxiety feels like peace. Peace becomes addictive. The cost of peace is autonomy. Autonomy requires uncertainty. Uncertainty threatens peace. The brain chooses peace. Over time, the trance creates emotional dependency. Members look to the group for cues on how to feel. Joy is shared. Anger is synchronized. Grief is regulated. Individual emotional responses weaken. Collective emotion strengthens. This creates emotional alignment. Alignment feels powerful. Power feels meaningful. Meaning replaces doubt. Doubt becomes a moral failure rather than a cognitive one. This reframing is crucial. Once doubt is moralized, self-censorship activates. The brain suppresses questions before they reach awareness. This is not lying to oneself. It is attentional gating. Thoughts that threaten identity are filtered out automatically. The trance is now self-sustaining. No external force is required. The brain polices itself. This is the point of no return for many. Leaving would require confronting identity collapse. Identity collapse feels like psychological annihilation. The brain avoids annihilation at all costs. It prefers distortion. The trance also alters perception of outsiders. Empathy narrows. Complexity flattens. Outsiders become symbols rather than people. Symbols are easier to dismiss. Dismissal reduces moral conflict. The group narrative becomes the lens through which reality is experienced. Alternative interpretations feel absurd or malicious. The brain stops asking what is true. It asks what is loyal. This is why cult members often appear calm while holding extreme beliefs. The beliefs reduce internal conflict. Conflict is stressful. Resolution feels like clarity. Clarity feels like enlightenment. This false enlightenment is one of the most powerful reinforcers of the trance. The individual feels awakened while becoming constrained. Freedom is redefined as obedience to the truth. The brain accepts this redefinition because it resolves tension. At this point, the trance is not just psychological, it is neurological. Neural pathways have been reinforced through repetition, emotion, and reward. Breaking them requires more than information. It requires destabilizing the SAS emotional foundation. That destabilization is terrifying, which is why cults discourage solitude. Solitude weakens synchronization. Silence allows doubt. Doubt threatens coherence. So the trance is kept active through constant engagement. Rituals, meetings, media, language. Every element keeps the brain entrained. The member feels busy, purposeful, and connected. But beneath that connection is dependency. And beneath dependency is fear. Fear of being alone with one's own mind. Because once the group quiets, something begins to surface. A faint sense of dissonance, a crack in the story, a question that feels dangerous to ask. That moment is where the trance either tightens or begins to unravel. And what determines the outcome is not intelligence or morality. It is whether the brain can tolerate uncertainty long enough to feel something else, something the trance has been protecting it from all along. That final phase is where the most painful and revealing transformation occurs. Because breaking the trance does not feel like waking up. It feels like falling apart. When the trance finally begins to weaken, it does not announce itself with clarity, relief, or liberation. It begins as discomfort, a subtle emotional static that no longer resolves through participation. The rituals feel slightly hollow. The certainty feels rehearsed rather than felt. The peace no longer settles fully in the body. This is not awareness yet. It is nervous system fatigue. The brain can only suppress contradiction for so long before the cost becomes noticeable. That cost shows up as anxiety, irritability, exhaustion, or emotional numbness. The mind does not immediately question belief. It questions itself. The first thought is not, "This is wrong," but "Something is wrong with me." This self-blame is protective. If the problem is internal, the identity can remain intact. The brain prefers internal failure over external collapse. But the cracks widen. Moments of silence become uncomfortable rather than soothing. The individual notices emotional reactions that do not match the group script. Guilt appears where pride is expected. Sadness appears where certainty is prescribed. These emotional mismatches are dangerous because they bypass ideology. Emotion is harder to argue with than thought. The trance responds by intensifying. The group may encourage deeper commitment, more sacrifice, more immersion, more purity. This escalation temporarily restores coherence, but it also increases pressure. Pressure accelerates fracture. Eventually, a moment occurs that cannot be integrated, a contradiction too large, a betrayal too personal, a cruelty too visible. The brain stalls. It cannot fully suppress the signal. This moment does not feel like enlightenment. It feels like grief, because the brain senses loss before it understands why. What is being lost is not just belief. It is belonging. It is identity. It is the structure that organized reality. The nervous system enters threat mode. Cortisol spikes. Sleep destabilizes. Rumination increases. The mind loops endlessly, trying to repair coherence. This is the most dangerous phase, not because of the group, but because of the self. Leaving now feels like psychological freefall. Staying feels like suffocation. The brain is caught between two incompatible survival strategies. This creates extreme stress. Under stress, the brain seeks certainty. That is why many people return to the group after initial doubt, not because they were wrong, but because uncertainty hurt more than distortion. Those who continue pulling away experience identity collapse. Identity collapse feels like ego death. The sense of self dissolves. Preferences feel artificial. Values feel borrowed. Memories feel suspect. The question, who am I, becomes unanswerable. This is not weakness. It is neurological recalibration. The brain is rebuilding a map of reality without the central organizing myth. During this phase, emotional dysregulation is common. Anger surges unexpectedly. Shame appears without clear cause. Fear becomes ambient rather than situational. The nervous system has lost its anchor. This is why former members often describe leaving as more painful than joining. Joining provided answers. Leaving creates questions. Questions require tolerance. Tolerance requires safety. Safety is scarce during identity collapse. The brain begins to grieve, not just the group, but the version of self that existed within it. This grief is complex. It includes relief and regret simultaneously. Relief at freedom, regret at lost time, shame for complicity, anger at manipulation, love for people still inside, hatred for the system that shaped them. These conflicting emotions overwhelm the limbic system. Emotional flooding occurs. This is often mistaken for weakness or instability. It is actually integration. The brain is reconnecting emotional responses that were previously compartmentalized. As integration progresses, cognition returns. Critical thinking slowly reactivates. But it feels different now. Less arrogant, more cautious. The individual realizes how easily certainty can be manufactured. This realization is sobering. It dismantles the fantasy of immunity. No one is immune. The trance did not happen because of stupidity. It happened because of humanity. This realization can either harden the person or soften them. Those who harden retreat into cynicism. Those who soften develop humility. Humility is the true opposite of the trance. Humility allows uncertainty without collapse. It allows belief without fusion. It allows belonging without erasure. Over time, neural pathways weaken. Triggers lose intensity. Language loses its charge. Symbols lose their power. The brain learns that safety can exist without the group. This learning is slow. It requires repeated experiences of autonomy without punishment. Each safe disagreement rewires fear. Each independent choice restores agency. Eventually, the trance is no longer active, but its echo remains. Certain tones still activate unease. Certain phrases still provoke reaction. This is memory, not belief. The brain remembers patterns even after abandoning meaning. Healing does not erase vulnerability. It makes it visible. Former members often become hyper-aware of manipulation. This awareness can feel isolating, but it is also protective. They recognize emotional engineering where others feel inspiration. They sense coercion where others feel motivation. This sensitivity is not paranoia. It is calibration. The final stage is integration of responsibility, not blame, responsibility. The individual acknowledges their participation without condemning themselves. This step is essential. Without it, shame persists. Shame keeps the trance alive internally. Responsibility restores dignity. Dignity allows forward motion. The person no longer defines themselves by what they escaped. They define themselves by how they choose now. This is the true end of the trance. Not rebellion, not exposure, but internal autonomy. Autonomy does not mean isolation. It means conscious connection. The brain learns that belonging does not require surrender. Meaning does not require obedience. Purpose does not require erasure. The trance promised certainty. Reality offers complexity. Complexity is harder, but it is honest. And honesty, unlike the trance, does not require constant maintenance. It does not punish doubt. It does not fear silence. It does not collapse when questioned. That is how you know the difference. Not by how convincing it feels, but by how much of you is allowed to remain intact. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful or eye-opening, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more practical psychology insights, self-awareness tools, and mind-sharpening advice. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.